Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Ask an Explorer webinar. My name is Liz Hoadley, and I work with the education team at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Office of Ocean Exploration and Research, or NOAA Ocean Exploration as we call ourselves for short. I'll be our host for tonight's event, and in just a few moments, I'll introduce you to some of the biggest challenges faced by ocean explorers to set the stage for the rest of the evening, where we'll hear from a variety of experts that are working on challenges, including exploring the deep ocean, collecting, analyzing, and sharing ocean data, and making ocean exploration accessible. For each of these big challenge themes, we'll have 1 to 2 experts that share their stories about real-world exploration challenges they face and the innovative solutions they're working on to overcome those challenges, and to answer as many of your questions as we can get to in tonight's event. Many of you have submitted questions when you registered, and we have several of them queued up for our experts. But you can also submit questions while you're watching tonight's event using the chat or comment box. And before we get too far, let's test that out and make sure our chat and comment functions are working. So if you're tuning in on a platform like YouTube or social media that has a comment or chat box, please tell us who you are, where you're joining from, and how many people are tuning in with you. So again, in your chat box or comment box, please tell us who you are, where you're joining from, and how many people are tuning in with you. And I see them rolling in. I know we have over 1,600 people registered tonight and can't wait to see where you're all joining in from. And while those answers roll in, let's go ahead and dive in. So as I mentioned at the start of the event, I work for NOAA Ocean Exploration, and our office is dedicated to exploring the unknown ocean. We lead expeditions on NOAA ship Oceanus Explorer and other research vessels, revealing the incredible life, habitats, and phenomena that lie beneath the water's surface. Exploration is key to increasing our understanding of the ocean, so we can move effectively, manage, conserve, regulate, and use ocean resources that are vital to all of our lives. Even though the ocean covers over 70% of the Earth's surface and plays a critical role in supporting life on our planet, our understanding of the ocean remains limited, and most of it's still largely unexplored. Why is that? Well, it's difficult to explore the ocean. There are many challenges that must be overcome to study it. For starters, the ocean is huge. Not only does it cover 70% of the Earth's surface, the ocean accounts for 90% of livable space on the planet. And that's because the ocean is three-dimensional. It has volume. We can compare it to the forest. To study the forest, you can't just walk along the forest floor. You have to investigate life up in the trees. So while one major exploration challenge is mapping the seafloor to understand the features and life at the bottom, it's a whole other challenge to study the water column, which is all of the water, the ocean processes, and the life between ocean surface and seafloor. To date, less than 25% of the seafloor has been mapped to high resolution, and an even smaller amount of the water column has been explored. Another major challenge to ocean exploration is depth. The average depth of the ocean is about 4,000 meters, or just over 13,000 feet deep. That is equivalent to approximately 350 school buses. And that's just the average depth. The deepest part of the ocean, or the Challenger Deep of the Mariana Trench, is just under 11,000 meters, or 36,000 feet deep. That is so deep that if you put Mount Everest in the trench, there would still be about 2,000 meters of water on top of it, which is just crazy. Exploring in waters that deep introduces a lot of additional challenges, like crushing pressures, complete darkness, and near freezing temperatures. At the ocean surface, the atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere, meaning you feel the weight or the pressure of just one of the world's atmospheres right on you right now. Not too bad, right? However, as you move deeper into the ocean, that pressure increases rapidly due to the weight of the water above you. If we dive to 6,000 meters, which is how deep remotely operated vehicle Deep Discoverer is designed to go, the pressure is about 596 atmospheres, or 596 times what you feel right now, which is the pressure that is equivalent to the weight of an elephant standing on a quarter. You can see what the pressure does to a simple styrofoam cup. And while there's many animals that have adaptations to withstand this pressure, any equipment or tools that operate there must be designed to withstand or not collapse under all of that pressure. Then there's the darkness. There's very little natural light below 200 meters in the ocean, and below 1,000 meters, there's no sunlight at all. Animals that live in this zone have adaptations that help them survive in complete darkness. Many are able to produce their own light via my favorite deep sea adaptation, bioluminescence. But to study the deep ocean, underwater vehicles must bring their lights with them in order for cameras to see what lives there. And the last challenge we'll mention are the freezing temperatures. Below 200 meters or 660 feet, the average water temperature is just above freezing at 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Brr. This is a challenge because most of the materials that are on our underwater vehicles shrink in cold water. And different materials shrink at different temperatures and at different rates, which can be a special challenge for tools that are built with different or mixed materials like ROVs, which have metal, plastic, and foam elements. And yet, even with all of these challenges, ocean exploration isn't impossible. To overcome these challenges, ocean exploration is an industry made up of people from various disciplines that work together, each bringing their individual expertise, excitement, and curiosity to the table. Much like many of you in the audience that are working as a team to create an innovative solution for an ocean exploration challenge as part of a robotics competition this year. And now, the exciting part for tonight's event, it's time to meet our explorers. And as a reminder, this part is divided into 3 sections with experts ready to answer questions related to each of those exploration challenge themes. We have several questions lined up that you submitted when you registered. However, at any point in tonight's event, using that same comment function where you submitted who you are and where you joined from, you can also send in questions. And I can see a lot of you have already been sending in really awesome questions. And with that, let's introduce our first group of experts that work on challenges associated with exploring deep waters. To answer your questions related to this topic, we're joined by Molly Curran and Anthony Gerentino, who both are engineers at Hole Oceanographic Institution and specialize in developing underwater vehicles that overcome the challenges of exploring in the deep. Welcome, Molly and Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Anthony, if you don't mind, let's start with you. You work on perhaps one of the most famous underwater vehicles of all time, the Alvin. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and a current problem you're working on?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Tarantino, and I'm a technical program manager and an Alvin pilot here at WHOI. Our organization is geared towards unlocking the secrets of the deep ocean, and we are made up of scientists and engineers. Me personally, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and I was the son of Italian immigrants. And when I was a kid, well, I was obsessed with sports and always figured I'd be a professional baseball player when I grew up. But alas, I had to go and get an education and try and find a real job. So I was the first in my family to go to school and to go to college. And I graduated from Wentworth Institute of Technology with an electrical engineering degree. I also got to continue playing baseball there, which was great, but eventually I had to get a real job. So after I graduated, I had several different jobs, but eventually what took me to Woods Hole is an amazing trip to Hawaii, where I did my first scuba dive and did lots of snorkeling. Eventually, after that trip, I took a look at the Woods Hole website and found the Alvin posting and started working with the Alvin group. I've been here at WHOI ever since, and it's now been almost 25 years. So I've been pretty lucky to do what I do. So on to that. As a pilot here at Woods Hole, I get to dive Alvin. And that's actually me in the porthole looking forward. This is during some dives in the East Pacific Rise. This is at about 2,500 meters. So as a pilot, I operate the vehicle and I make sure that the folks inside are safe. And we execute all sorts of experiments that the scientists we work with put together for us. So that's been just an amazing thing to be able to do research that scientists have dreamt up for many years. I get to take people to the deepest parts of the ocean. And as another part of my job, I am also a technical program manager. So I get to drive some of the technical development that happens on the vehicle to improve and increase its capabilities. Just recently, I was working with our team, which is a great group of women and men, and we made modifications to the vehicle to increase its operational depth from 4,500 meters to 6,500 meters. And what that does is it unlocks a whole lot more of the ocean bottom. So at 4,500 meters, you can access roughly 68% of the ocean bottom. And at 6,500 meters, which is almost 4 miles down, you can access about 98% of the ocean bottom. So
That's incredible, Anthony. Yeah, I want to make sure we save time for all of our experts tonight, but I know a lot of I see some of the comments rolling in, and personally, it's a bucket list item for me to dive into Alvin one day. Mm-hmm. So I know there's a lot of us that are very jealous about what you do, but I want to make sure we have time to include Molly too, because she's working on some really awesome vehicles also at Woods Hole. Molly, can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Molly Kern. I'm a mechanical engineer in the Deep Submergence Lab here at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I actually grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. I grew up outdoors and hands-on, but I also really loved baby dolls and dressing up. My family, they were all engineers, and we did something a little odd. We actually raced jet skis, which was a lot of fun growing up, and I got to see how they put their engineering skills really to the test to make the jet skis faster for racing. So I think that's really what fueled my love for both the water and engineering. And then I went to college at the University of New Hampshire. My junior year, I began a minor in ocean engineering. And this is really where I fell in love with the challenges that the ocean presented. I did my senior project on a wave energy conversion buoy. The first time we deployed it, a bigger than expected wave came along and smashed it to pieces. And that actually was when I really decided I wanted to work in the ocean, realizing how harsh it was and how difficult it was. So after that day, we all went back to the drawing board and made it more robust so that we could deploy it again. After college, I got my job at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And as an engineer here, I get to be a part of a bigger team who comes up with ideas to help scientists explore the ocean. You can see in the image here, as engineers, we work with the scientists to come up with an idea or fix a problem, and then we make models, and then we bring it to life, and then we deploy it in the ocean. So it's a really rewarding process that we get to go through. We're kind of involved in everything from assembly, fabrication, testing, operations. And the past 2 summers, I've been lucky enough to go on expeditions up to the Arctic. One of them deploying a vehicle in Arctic sea ice, and the other was deploying that same vehicle up against the glacial front. And ice poses a lot of issues and is a really challenging place to work with these vehicles and with the ships. But it's really important, has a big impact on climate change and sea level rise. So it's really a place that we want to be exploring. We've had some issues up, it poses a lot of challenges. Some of them, the ice breaking off or the ice above the vehicle. You can't just come to the surface when things go wrong. Additionally, when the ice is melting, it's actually carrying a lot of sediment with it. And that sediment could fall on the vehicle and make it really heavy, which we had happen to us. So after that, we made a change. We then checked our buoyancy after every time we went to the seafloor. So here you can see our vehicle that we deployed under the ice. And this is a remotely operated vehicle. And we were able to work underneath the ice, as you can see there, and up against the glacial front.
That's really cool, Molly. And I know I personally think I got to visit Woods Hole this summer, and it was for my first time ever. And it was just like an engineering candy land. It's a really special place. And I hope a lot of the people tuning in tonight get the opportunity at some point, because it's really cool. But I know we have, for the sake of time, a ton of questions that were submitted related to challenges exploring the deep that I want to get to that came in at registration, and some more rolling in live tonight. Molly, if you don't mind, I think the first one is perfect for you. And we have some young explorers that want to know what materials or technologies or design strategies make it possible to explore some of the deepest waters.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the major challenges is withstanding the deep pressure in the ocean. As you get deeper, you have more pressure. And so we need to decide on the strength, the size, the shape of the components that are going down, because certain shapes and certain materials are stronger than others. So being an engineer, we have to look at all the different factors. We also need to consider how to get there. For example, oftentimes autonomous robots are actually shaped like fish. Why is that, do you think? It's because it's an efficient hydrodynamic shape, and that helps us preserve energy. So thinking about all of these different factors when you're coming up with a design to go to the deep ocean.
That's awesome. And I think that leads us right into the next one perfectly. And Anthony, if you don't mind, I think this one's good for you. What are the materials or design strategies, like specific materials, that help protect against corrosion? Because I know that's another issue we have when we go in saltwater.
Problem for us in saltwater, much like rust is a problem for iron in air. So when you put two different metals together and you put it in the salt water, you get this problem where you have less noble materials kind of eating away at or causing an electric or a chemical reaction that wears one down. So what we do is we're really careful about the types of materials we choose. For Alvin, we use a lot of titanium because that's very resistant to corrosion. But also you can coat materials in such a way that keeps the salt water away from them or isolates them from other materials. And that helps with their longevity and with their resistance to corrosion.
That's really cool. And I just noticed you have your Alvin t-shirt on tonight. So way to represent that Alvin team. That's awesome. Molly, I've got another one that has come up several times in tonight's chat and submitted ahead of time. How do remotely operated vehicles get their electricity, and what role do batteries play in deep sea exploration?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some robots have batteries, and some robots get their power from the ship. And so if they're getting their power from the ship, they need a big cable to go down. So that's your conventional ROV has a big cable that goes from the ship to the ROV and is providing it almost infinite power. Other vehicles have batteries on board, and so they have to be conscious of the power that you're using. So just like you have limited power in your cell phone or your computer and you have to charge it at night, those robots, we can only put them down for a certain amount of time, then we have to bring them back up on the ship and recharge them.
You guys have already covered so many big challenges related to exploring deep. Some of our viewers tonight really want to know, how do you test a deep sea vehicle without actually going into the ocean? How do you know it's ready for these high pressures at the deep depths?
Yeah, that's a pretty complicated process, but it all starts at the subsystem level. So there's a few things that we need to test. We need to test for functionality, and then we obviously need to make sure that whatever these components we build are capable of withstanding the pressure. So in some instances, we'll do the electrical test here in the lab, make sure it's ready to go into the water, and then we'll transfer it to a test tank that's very similar to the ocean salinity, and we'll test it there. And then if we want to check them for pressure tolerance, we actually have a pressure test facility that can simulate the pressures at depth, the ambient pressures at depth, at any water depth. Additionally, once we've finally got a vehicle assembled, we can take it right out back because we happen to be conveniently located right on the water, and we can actually put the entire vehicle into the salt water right here in a very controlled condition and test it entirely in our test well.
That's really cool. And I'm going to ask a little follow-up question to that because I'm really intrigued by these pressure tanks that you said that can simulate deep sea pressure. They have to be pretty special, right? How many of those exist in the world?
I guess I can take that one. They're fairly special, and what makes them special in some instances is their size and how big of a component they can accommodate. So for some of the very largest ones, only one or two may exist in the world. The test facility that we used to test the Alvin personnel sphere was fairly large, and there's only two in existence, one here in the United States, and the only other one that I know of in existence that would fit that large component is in Russia. So they're pretty special, and they're obviously pretty valuable as well. They cost a lot of money to maintain and operate. So I think they're well taken care of.
That's really cool. All right. I got another question for you, Molly. So some of our viewers have definitely done their homework because the questions are getting more specific. And we have some viewers who want to know, what are the advantages of a two-body ROV system?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know the ocean has a lot of waves and sometimes really bad weather. And that doesn't just disappear when we're trying to launch our vehicles. And so oftentimes the ship will be moving quite a lot and obviously is at the mercy of those bigger waves and the weather. But you don't want to be moving around and getting pulled and tugged when you're on the seafloor with the ROV. So we use a two-body system to decouple the motion of the ship from the motion of the ROV. So the ROV can still be stable while the ship is moving with the waves.
Awesome. And I think we've got an illustration of it here. So this is ROV Hercules that operates off of Nautilus.
Yeah.
And you can see the two-body, that intermediate, the camera sled in the middle there that you mentioned, kind of bobbing up and down with the ship.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then the last thing with that is sometimes it also gives you another eye down looking at the ROV, which is always helpful.
Definitely. That must be how we get some of the videos of the ROVs at the bottom, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Super cool. All right, Anthony, I've got another one about human-occupied vehicles. And our viewers want to know, how deep can human-occupied vehicles safely dive with explorers on board?
Earlier in your discussion, you talked about the Challenger Deep in the Marianas Trench. Today, vehicles exist that can take explorers to the very bottom of that trench. And the biggest thing that enables that is human factors engineering. So when we build and test vehicles that are made for human occupancy, we're concerned with a lot of things, from where they sit to how they breathe and how comfortable they are when they're in the sub. So that means we do a lot of testing, and we make sure that all of the life support systems required to keep people alive during these journeys to the bottom of the ocean are functional and applicable. So that, coupled with the fact that we do a lot of testing on our components and our vehicles prior to putting people in them, ensures maximum reasonable assurance that people are going to be safe and come back from their dives.
That's awesome. And you guys have a great track record at that too, for sure. Well, Molly, we had a question queued up about ice, but I think you did such a great job with your intro. If you're okay, we'll skip that one and jump around for the sake of time, because we have had so many questions coming in about underwater vehicle communication. So Anthony, I'm actually going to kick this one back to you. So kind of following up on divers in human occupied vehicles going down, how do the different types of underwater vehicles, ROVs, AUVs, HOVs, all communicate with pilots and science crew up at a base station, either on land or on a ship above?
Great question. So up here on the surface in air, we use radio waves to communicate with each other via cell phones or VHF radios. Underwater, it's a lot easier to communicate acoustically. So we use sound transmission. So typically there's a receiver. So for human occupied vehicles, there's typically a receiver transmitter unit on the ship, and there's the same receiver transmitter unit in the sub. And we're just modulating sound through the water. And that works really well for us. And just as a point of reference, acoustics or sound through air travels at roughly 343 meters per second. And sound through the water travels at 1,481 meters per second. So it travels pretty efficiently, and it's a good mode of communication. Now, ROVs and AUVs use similar technology to navigate and communicate, but I'll let Molly tell you a little bit about how they communicate from the surface with each other, because in some cases it can be a little different.
Yeah, so thanks, Anthony. Yeah, we can actually not just communicate from the ship down to the robot, but the robots themselves can communicate with each other and then back to the ship. So for example, if we have one robot working on the seafloor and another robot kind of monitoring it up above on the surface, then that surface robot can then send messages from the surface through air over to the ship. So it's, they're small messages, and kind of like how you would text someone back and forth. That's kind of what the robots do to talk back and forth.
That's really cool, guys. And thank you for kind of covering both aspects of that, both communication with the pilots on board and with the robots themselves. I know that's definitely something that has come a long way in recent years and is rapidly advancing. Mm-hmm. Molly, before we turn it over to the next section, we have had several comments. People are dying to know what's on the whiteboard behind you.
That's a great question. So in engineering, everything really starts with an idea. And from an idea, you're usually scribbling on the whiteboard with a team of people. Being a mechanical engineer, I'm working with electrical engineers and software engineers and data engineers, and it really takes a full team to come up with a solution typically, but it usually starts with a piece of paper and a whiteboard.
That's awesome. And I think that's such a relevant message. I know we have so many robotics teams joining us tonight for this event, and they all have to work together in order to accomplish their challenge. So thank you to both of you for joining us tonight. Your answers have been awesome, and I'm sure we will have many more questions at the end of tonight's event.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, we're going to bring up our next two experts. So we have an expert from NOAA Ocean Exploration and from Ocean Exploration Trust, who are here to talk about the challenges associated with deep ocean data, how to maximize the amount of data collected during each expedition, how are those massive volumes of data then analyzed, and how is that data used to communicate our findings. So welcome, Philip and Jonathan. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm sure you've seen the chat already. We have tons of excited viewers tonight, and really excited to hear from you. Philip, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Philip Hoffman. I'm the technology team lead for NOAA Ocean Exploration. So I sit in the same federal office that Liz sits in, but not in the same location. Our folks are spread out literally all across the country on all three of the ocean basins that border the United States. And I got started in this business really when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And there's sort of two things that drove me to come into the world of ocean science, ocean exploration, oceanography, whatever of the different scientific terms you want to use. The first is the Portuguese man of war, and there should be an image coming up that has that in it here momentarily. And the second is a guy named Jacques Cousteau. And you can now see pictures of both of these people. And I actually use this slide when I'm talking to grad students and to people in college and to adults in various community functions. I blame these two guys explicitly. When I was a kid, on public broadcasting, which is now known by many people as PBS, there was a television show every week called The Underwater World of Jacques Cousteau. And that's him there in the dark jumpsuit kind of waving at his aquanauts in the back. And Cousteau started out in World War II as a French Navy officer and ended up as one of the pioneers of ocean technology. And every week, PBS would bring this show to my house, and my parents would let me watch it because it was educational television and it was valuable, unlike all the drivel that was on ABC and CBS and NBC, which were the other three channels we had, if that tells you how old I am. And Cousteau and his folks would film their expeditions to the oceans of the world. Just being able to film underwater at that time was a technological advancement. He designed and developed this saucer back there, which is a predecessor to the kinds of human-occupied Anthony was telling you about. And he built a whole host of other custom ocean technology solutions to the fact that humans can only do so much under the water. utterly fascinated. I've watched that entire series, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 times. You can sometimes find DVD copies of it on eBay if you like to do that sort of thing. At the same time, we were visiting St. Augustine, Florida one summer. Some friends of my parents, and of course, you take your kids and you go to the beach, right? Because you have to wear your children out and they want to go and play at the beach. And offshore of the beach, there's this massive school of these Portuguese man-o-war. And if you don't know what these are, they're jellyfish, so they're invertebrates. They are entirely at the mercy of the wind and ocean surface currents for how they move around. They cannot swim. And they freaked my parents out. And I was 9, and I decided that anything that freaked my parents out, I needed to understand better. And I've been doing it ever since.
Awesome. And Philip, I know we're going to hear a little bit more about what you do in a second with some of our questions. Well, that'll come out. We're going to pass it to Jonathan. Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, guys. My name is Jonathan Feely, and I'm a media producer for the Ocean Exploration Trust, and our website is nautiluslive.org. So as a media producer, I create the highlights with a great team of editors and fellow SciCons individuals, where we essentially go down to the bottom of our sea with our ROVs, as Molly mentioned, and most ROVs in Alvin have a camera on them. And so we'll do these big, long dives of 36 hours plus going from the bottom of a seamount to the top, and we'll see amazing things. And it's our job to boil down 36 hours into one of the coolest moments that we have. So that's my job, and it's an amazing opportunity to do that. I got into this career just loving cameras, loving different types of environments, and always looking and learning and exploring. And in my job now, we have 2 real big goals. If you go to our YouTube, I'd hope that you could look at all of these different videos, that some of them are funny, some of them are educational. But our goal is to share this amazing excitement of deep sea discovery with you, so you don't have to watch all 36 hours of an individual dive. And our goal is to keep it real. And if you have the chance to watch some of these highlight videos, whether it's from Okeanos or the EV Nautilus, I hope you'd hear the excitement behind exploration. And that's what we do. We listen for these moments where it's 3 o'clock in the morning and someone sees something amazing. That's real, and it's life, and it's an awesome role to have. So for some of our challenges with SciComm, it's not necessarily even just seeing those moments and editing them and putting them up on our TikTok or our YouTube, but it's also about thinking about how we can integrate more data into what we see. So you saw a little bit of our YouTube. If you go to our YouTube full dive recordings, we actually have parts of our actual scientific observations as chapters that you can go and explore and see what we noted during a dive. And then we're also working on some exciting new projects that actually take that live video through a process called photogrammetry. So here you go. Here's a highlight video of actually we're looking at an amazing little rock that has incredible pieces of coral on it. So we're investigating how to use actual gaming engines like Unreal Engine to take this kind of video that you see and actually create a 3D model of it. So that live video where a scientist described each one of the species that we saw, identified it, you could see that we can actually create a 3D model of that. And the goal is to stick this in the same 3D engine as is used in Fortnite, Unreal Engine, so that people at your level and kids at heart can all actually explore using new media. So that's what I do. That's what we absolutely love with Ocean Exploration Trust and Nautilus Live.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. And I really love that you guys capture both ends of our data spectrum. And I think that's how we're going to channel our questions for this part during this event. So we've had questions come in about how we collect data, how we analyze, and then what do we do with it? And I think we've got time for at least one of each before we move on to the next section. So Philip, if you don't mind, let's start with you. I think as technology team lead, you're perfect for this one. What are the benefits of using autonomous or uncrewed systems to explore the ocean?
So the answer kind of builds on answers that we heard to questions in the previous section, which really is that if we put autonomous vehicles in the ocean, which is our fancy term for robots of the sea, if you will, we can explore more places, we can explore them for longer, And we can get more kinds of data on each platform. So the video that Jonathan's talking about is one kind of data that we can get. We can get still images or photographs, if you will, and then we can get all sorts of environmental data, and we can do it at depth, and we can do it over long periods of time, like hours to days, and in some cases to weeks and even months now. And it's great because it means we finally arrived technologically at a point where we can really understand the ocean from top to bottom in a way that we couldn't even 10 years ago, because we have this massive fleet of autonomous vehicles that's growing every day that can give this data back to us. And this demonstrates the breadth and depth of those autonomous vehicles. Now, the Dumbo octopus in the middle is not an autonomous vehicle. I want to point that out. It's a living being. We do not use them for experimentation. But as Jonathan pointed out, we can get images of these creatures at depth in the sea and do things with those images that help us to understand not only the creature itself, but the habitat, the ecosystem in which it lives.
That's awesome. And I think you brought up a great point. We are gathering massive volumes of data. I checked in with our exploration team yesterday just to how to quantify that. And they were telling me in just a mapping expedition alone, we collect enough data in one day to fill like 4 iPhones worth of storage, which just blows my mind, trying to make it relatable here. And so we've had some questions about how we process that data. I think one that maybe each of you could speak to a different element on is how are scientists using artificial intelligence to help us with that data analysis? And whoever wants to jump in on that first.
Well, so Jonathan sort of gave us a beginning pointer to that with sort of the photogrammetry work that we do. And a lot of that photogrammetry work and a lot of the engines for Fortnite and some of these other analysis tools that he works with and is very familiar with, those are built on artificial intelligence or machine learning basis. They're hung on that framework. The thing that machine learning does is it gives us the ability to sift through massive volumes of data, tons and tons and volumes of data, and find the thing that's actually right. And this video is a great illustration of that, because those two little microorganisms and the other microorganisms swimming behind them, those are the important pieces of data in this video, even though the video is capturing all sorts of stuff floating around the water column that we have no interest in. And machine learning allows us to extract all of those pieces, and in many cases to determine what they are without a person having to sit there bleary-eyed poking themselves with toothpicks to try and find out, okay, that's this coral, or that's this fish, or that's this whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would take people into the control room of the EV Nautilus as an example of when we're diving. We don't necessarily have, right, the taxonomic expert of every single type of jellyfish or coral that's out there. Like, the sea is big, the sea is dark, and there are tons of animals that have been discovered and have never been discovered itself. So we really rely on not just the scientists that are joining us from the shore or that might be physically present inside of the control room. And you're looking at the control room right now. This is how we control the ROVs on EV Nautilus. But then using tools like artificial intelligence, we can run that video through a system after the fact and then use that to help pick out little elements that maybe the scientists didn't necessarily see, or they weren't the experts that were there to actually make the identification later. It's an incredibly powerful tool for such a massive amount of data, 36 hours, up to 36 hours at least, for just a single dive. It's incredible.
Wow. I don't even know how to process that volume. So power to you guys and your teams that do so. We are thankful for you. Jonathan, before we turn to our next person, I've got one more question for you. I know you mentioned that your background was in videography and filmmaking. So we've had a lot of viewers come in that are working on camera systems for the competition, and want to hear from you. What are some of the biggest challenges related to underwater photography and videography that you work with?
All right, so if you're working on a robot with camera, I'm sure you could take out your camera right now and poke outside and take a photo. But what my challenge would be is the fact that in deep ocean exploration, we have no light. So if you're creating a robot with a camera, you need to bring your own light with you, and you need to figure out how to get that light in a relationship with the camera itself so that it gets a good exposure and a good picture. And this is not a small thing, as I'm sure many of you would find out. There's ROV Hercules right there, and in the middle of it, we actually have about 10 total cameras in the middle and one big, beautiful cinema camera right in the middle. I want to give the analogy of hiking up Mount Everest with just a flashlight and a little camera. That's what we do. That's the scale of what we do during night where you can't see anything but your flashlight. So that's a major challenge that we have. And then the other big challenges are things like storage. Imagine 36 hours worth of recording video on a camera. How are you going to store any of that? And then finally, what I'll just say is that this is not just a videographer with a camera that's in charge of the ROV. This is the entire control room that is involved in the process of actually taking the video. You've got not just the video engineer that's keeping things in focus, making sure everything is in focus and recording, but it's also the ROV pilot that's actually pointing the camera where it's at. And then it's scientists noticing things like, hey, in the top right, there was just a little thing that just passed by. I think that was a whale. And the entire team has to move the ROV. There's one right there. That's a sperm whale that we discovered while we were down and descending into the depths. The entire control room needs to move that ROV, focus the cameras, the whole 9 yards to be able to capture that moment. It is not a one-person band to do what we do. That's it.
I'm sensing a theme in all of our expert answers tonight, and I'm appreciative of it, and I hope our teams are too. Thank you, Philip and Jonathan. I suppose it is no surprise that big data inspires lots of big questions from our budding roboticists. But I want to pause just to make sure we've got time for our last challenge theme. So thank you both, and we'll bring you on in a little bit because I know we have a few more questions related to data and videography. Thank you. So this last challenge theme is about accessibility, and this one is near and dear to my heart. We have just heard about some incredible ocean exploration technologies that are helping overcome big challenges related to exploring the ocean. However, multi-million-dollar instruments are not the only way to explore. And it is with that I'm so excited to introduce Samir Patel, who's developing some low-cost technologies to help us study the ocean, and just so happens to be working with some charismatic organisms to get the job done. Welcome, Samir. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. My name is Samir Patel. I'm a research biologist at a very small nonprofit called Coonamessett Farm Foundation that's based on Cape Cod and Falmouth. And I work on sea turtles, and I've been working on a variety of species, loggerheads and leatherbacks, Kemp's ridleys, and green turtles. Surprisingly, they do all inhabit Massachusetts waters. But I work with them between North Carolina and Massachusetts, so a pretty broad range. I apologize, I don't have any, I forgot a kid photo of me. That's basically, it would just be me without a beard. And I finished high school and undergrad and really didn't have a specific goal in mind as to getting into sea turtles, but I wanted to go to graduate school, and I did. And amazingly, I was in a lab that gave me the opportunity to study loggerheads in Greece. And so that put me on this path to being a sea turtle biologist. And one of the dilemmas with sea turtle research is it usually comes with low-cost solutions and low-cost equipment. And so you kind of have to think a little outside the box and find multiple uses for common everyday tools to make it all work. So to study sea turtles locally, we are trying to find out things like what do they eat, how do they respond to ocean development. We're going to have a lot of wind turbines in the Northwest Atlantic. And so that was an example of us putting out one of our low-cost camera tags on a leatherback turtle. And there's a picture of it right there. And what is interesting, one of the things we've actually found locally is that leatherback turtles, which are the largest sea turtle species in the world, they inhabit Massachusetts waters and they forage at a very high rate here. They're constantly eating jellyfish, and they do get disrupted by ocean development. And we actually had a study where we exposed them to seismic survey sound. And I think there's a clip that shows that, which has a bit of that you can experience what it was like to be a leatherback and exposed to that sound in the ocean. So that clicking sound is what's called a sparker, and it emits this loud click, which is an impulsive sound, sort of like a hammer strike. And the purpose of that click is to map the ocean floor. So it sends a sound to the bottom of the ocean, gets sent back to a receiver on a boat, and then that sound transmission then gets translated into density of the ocean floor. And we did this study to get a sense of how would leatherbacks respond to things like this because of ocean development, specifically wind turbine construction, which comes with a lot of hammer strikes for pilings and seismic surveys. And we noticed actually that their foraging slightly declined a little bit, but they do eat a lot of jellyfish. So it went from maybe eating 200 jellyfish in an hour to 100 jellyfish in an hour. So they were still getting pretty satiated over the course of the time that we filmed them. But then in addition to that, we filmed their breathing events and flipper beats and other fish around them. And so it was a pretty amazing experience to have that footage. And it all came from fairly low cost equipment that we developed, which were off the shelf dive cameras and off the shelf tags and floats and components to create these tools.
Thanks, Amir. Your work is so cool. Now, I know I'm a little biased. Sea turtles are my absolute favorite animal. But I'm really glad you could join us tonight because we've had a lot of questions, not just about the technology for ocean exploration, but specifically how it impacts animals. And so I appreciate you for including some of that in your answer. Hopefully that answers some of our student questions that registered with topics related to that. I've got a few more for you before we open the floor back for all of our experts. I think most importantly, from a lot of these folks and teams are working on low-cost robots themselves, and I think I see some Legos behind you.
Yeah. I do have kids, so Legos are a big part of our house.
That's fantastic. Well, I think my first question for you is, why is low-cost tech so important?
Well, this is a strange way to phrase this, but it democratizes research. So it makes it so that a lot of people can have access to the level of technology that yields high quality products. So I do have our camera tag here, and I can kind of go through the parts and you can kind of see how silly it actually ends up looking when, compared to those deep sea ROVs that are very streamlined and painted nicely. And this is a dive camera made by a company called Paralens. Unfortunately, they're out of business, but it was an Amazon purchase. It goes to 250 meters. It records temperature and depth. It takes high definition footage. It's an amazing camera, and it's small. It's very small, and conveniently in a relatively hydrodynamic shape instead of a GoPro, which is a flat face. And so if you put this on an animal that is already very hydrodynamic, you don't want to increase the drag on that animal too much. It's a leatherback. Those things are generally 1,000 pounds, so it would be very hard to increase their drag by too much. Then the other components of this is a foam that you buy from a company that makes foam. It's actually a local Massachusetts company. Again, more Amazon purchases with these suction cups, zip ties, rubber bands. This satellite tag and the radio tag are probably the two most uniquely animal behavior sort of ecologist devices. The satellite tag is $5,000, but it is something that any person can just go to the website and purchase. And then the way it releases, we have these little metal tabs here. They are a galvanic release, and it's basically a metal that has a known corrosion in the ocean at a certain rate and certain temperature. And so we can put it out, and then the tag will pop off the turtle within 2-3 hours, depending on the device that we put out, the galvanic release. And then we do have local engineers that'll help us build a little tag. And again, it's a Raspberry Pi in a waterproof tube. that has a hydrophone and temperature depth sensor and a GPS unit. But again, this is all accessible. You just go to the SparkFun website, and you can find all these boards, and you can chat GPT the code, and it is really something that can just be built in your own house. It'll take some trial and error, of course, but GitHub, things like that, are these amazing repositories for building very simple but very useful oceanographic sensing tools. And then you just find the way to slap that onto an animal. You find the components. This red stuff is cinnamon dental floss. It really is Frankenstein together with what we had around the office, but it has worked for us for 6-7 years now, and we kind of are really happy with our little invention here, and use it over and over and over again.
Well, that is fantastic. And I love that you had it handy and able to share it with everybody. And because I think that really speaks to, like, it's homegrown. And those are sometimes the best solutions, and certainly those solutions our teams are working on that are tuning in. Thank you,
Great.
Samir.
Sure.
Now, before you run away, I'm going to bring the rest of our experts back on screen. I know we're quickly running out of time, not slowly, very quickly. I want to be able to ask a couple more questions that have come in on the chat. And just to know, I know we have way more than we could possibly get to. We're going to answer some of these with resources after the fact, and I'll share more information about that at the end. So hopefully our teams aren't getting disappointed if we don't get to your question. We will do our best to try to hit at least the big themes for all of our questions. I think the first question I want to tackle is coming in from Samarth. And maybe Anthony and Molly, I think you guys would be great to answer this one. They want to know, how long does it generally take to plan a mission or to plan out the design and implementation of your different tools?
Anthony, I can start off and then hand it over to you, because
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of answers to this.
Yeah.
And it depends on the scope of what you want to do, right? So we've done projects really quickly, and we've done keeping the scope small and understanding what needs to get done. And so we've done some robotic vehicles in a matter of short weeks or months, smaller vehicles, and then other projects that maybe Anthony can talk about a little bit have taken many, many years. So they're really, it's a really big variety, and it just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. We plan out a lot of things, projects and missions, and they're kind of different, but also the same. It starts with subject matter experts getting together and talking about what our objectives are, and then planning that out. So with the Alvin upgrade project, we did it in 2 stages, and it was executed over nearly 20 years. So I started in 2000 and started reviewing requirements for the new vehicle, and ultimately it was tested and sea trialed and commissioned in 2022. So if that gives you a sense for anything, that's a long one. And then as far as mission planning goes, I also deal with some mission planning here at Woods Hole, and we put out a schedule, but the mission planning process, again, can be quick or long. But for Alvin, it starts with putting together a proposal, getting it funded by the funding agency, then getting it scheduled, and then actually executing it. And that cycle can take 2 years or longer. So it is a bit variable depending on how things are happening and what your funding source is. So it's fairly it sounds like a simple question, but it's a complicated one to answer.
No, I appreciate you guys covered both ends of the spectrum, from both short to the more complex. So I think that gives our viewers the insight they're looking for. And I'm going to kick it to the remainder of our experts, kind of following up on that. In your careers, Philip, Jonathan, Samir, do you have a favorite mission or project that you've ever tackled? I don't know if anyone. Samir, we just had you up. You want to go first?
So yeah, sure. I mean, to me, it has been the camera tags on the leatherbacks. I work with loggerheads where we capture them and satellite tag them. I work with other animals that strand, the Kemp's Ridleys and green turtles that strand on the beaches. And so we have to do necropsies, which is essentially an autopsy on a dead animal. But working with an animal that is 1,000 pounds, the size of a car, essentially, and then being able to access that animal, put a camera on it, see what its life is like for those 2 hours. And it's also very local. We do this in Massachusetts waters. So I leave my house, get on a boat, put a camera on a turtle, hang out, recover it, and come home. It's pretty amazing to have that be just like my routine in my life and in suburban Massachusetts. So that's definitely got to be my favorite one for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll pass it, Jonathan, if you don't mind.
Samir, I would absolutely love my routine to also be going out and putting cameras on sea turtles. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I'll just say, of course, I'm biased. You know, I love cameras, I love technology, but the cool thing about deep ocean exploration, especially, is that there's so much left to be explored. I mean, at the end of the day, a camera's just a tool, and you either see something or you don't. But in deep sea exploration, you often see amazing things, and you're never going to know what you're going to get on a dive. We go to the bottom of a seamount, to the top of a seamount is kind of our usual like exploration MO, but we're so rarely even go to the same seamount to do 2 dives, right? That's a pretty rare occurrence. And it just gives you a little bit of a show of how big the ocean is. And so you don't know what your favorite thing is, because you might say one dive was your best, and then you dive on a new seamount and you discover something brand new, and it is just amazing.
I think you capture a really great point too, of sometimes you might be planning what you think is the greatest dive ever, but sometimes it's the stuff that comes up serendipitously that's the best.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think every engineer here will totally resonate with the fact that sometimes you hype yourself up and you're like, this is going to be the best thing ever. I've done this for 2 months. It's going to be amazing. And you go down there and it's just mud. Not that mud isn't cool. Some people love mud. But then other times you're like, oh, well, let's just go down here. The weather was bad. I need to go over here to hide from the weather, and we'll just dive on this seamount to see what's up. And then suddenly you make a discovery of a brand new species, or your vehicle performs better than it's ever done before in some challenging current or other circumstance. And that's why we're ocean exploration and not like ocean just engineering or ocean just science. Like, you don't know what you're going to get, and that's what makes this so awesome.
Awesome. Well, Philip, I'm actually going to change it up on you a little bit to see if we can get one more question squeezed in. And I think since you do so much with autonomous tech, this next question might be perfect for you. We have a few writing in who want to know, can robots replace all scientific diving? Can they replace the human component of ocean exploration?
I don't think so. And the reason that I don't think so is that humans are incredibly well-engineered environmental data gathering machines. And from the time we are born until the time we die, all of our senses are uniquely attuned to tell us all sorts of things about the world with which we are interacting. And the compute power that would be required to do that with cameras and thermometers and pressure sensors, not to mention guidance systems and, you know, the whole gamut of things. The compute power alone to do that, to just replace one diver, is probably more than the number of supercomputers we have in the world right now. And so I don't believe we can get there. What the autonomous platforms do is they allow us to go to places either where humans can't exist because of pressure or other factors, or where they could exist, but it's incredibly dangerous for them to exist. And that opens up so much more knowledge. It opens up so much more data. It opens up so much more opportunity. And so let's put the autonomous craft where they're good, can do. And we'll continue to dive, because at the end of the day, we're better engineered to do that than any robot will ever be.
Awesome. Thank you all. We are right at time, so I want to be respectful for everyone tuning in and all of your time. Thank you to all of our experts this evening. If we can get some thank yous coming in from everyone else as well. There are a lot of questions in the chat. We will do our best to follow up with them, and I will show you where to find some additional answers and resources to find those answers. But before we do that, thank you again, and goodbye to our experts for the evening.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I don't know about all of you, but I'm feeling particularly inspired by all of the brilliant minds that are working to solve some of our biggest ocean exploration challenges. And before you drop off, and I understand if you have to because we are now over time, but I have a few final activities and resources for all of you. First, I would love to hear from all of you again, but with that, I need a little bit of help filling out a word cloud. So if everyone who is still tuned in, if you could help us by telling us what ocean exploration challenge are you most excited about after attending tonight's webinar? And there's a few ways you can do that. You can scan the QR code that is here on the screen, or you can visit menti.com and use the voting code 12532799. And try to keep your answer short so that we can build a really, really awesome word cloud. And you can do that. And while you're doing it, I will keep going so that we can stay to time as best as possible. So as those responses roll in, I want to share some additional resources that may help our first LEGO League teams that are tuning in tonight. And I know there's a lot of you. And so we have some web resources that we have been curating behind the scenes to help you prepare for your competition. So if I could get those resources pulled up on screen. We've got the first two here, the link for NOAA Ocean Exploration and the link for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. These are lists of curated resources from both of our organizations that have been specifically queued up to help our first LEGO League teams. So they are fact sheets, they're videos, they're explainers, and more that really dive deeper into the challenges of exploring ocean exploration or exploring the ocean, and some of the tools and technology that we talked about tonight and more that help us solve those challenges. And then the last link here, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, if we could get those resources back on the screen, that takes you to Nautilus Live. So as he mentioned, one of the ways that everybody tuning in tonight can participate in ocean exploration is to join a dive. The lag time for a dive is sometimes less than 2 seconds, meaning you are watching what our scientists are watching while the ROVs are down below the ocean, which is just really, really amazing. And you are hearing the scientists' reactions live. That's my favorite part. Just hearing someone like Anthony, who's been in this industry and seen a lot of things and works on one of perhaps the coolest robots, a little bias again, seeing what someone like that, when they get excited, when they find something new, like Jonathan said, that was not planned and not expected, is just really special. And we've got our word coming in from lots of you. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Wow, we hear lots of people excited about deep sea photography, virtual reality, awesome, deep sea exploration in general, and pollution is a big theme too. Very interesting. I can't wait to see some of the innovative solutions you guys come up with. And the last thing to bring up tonight, we have a special opportunity that's being offered by our colleagues at Woods Hole to support our first LEGO League teams. And they're offering to help connect you with experts in the field that are able to review your innovative ideas and provide feedback, which we know is an important part of your competition. This is no small task, so this opportunity is available for a limited time only. Between October 7th and October 18th, first LEGO League teams may submit their projects, their challenge and innovative solutions to the Woods Hole K-12 program coordinator at the email on the screen, k-12coordinator@hui.edu, and their program coordinator will forward your project on to an expert in the field that is offered to review student projects to give you feedback. So don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Definitely take that down. This recording will go up on the NOAA website with the first QR code on the previous screen. So please do check back and take advantage of that opportunity starting next week. And with that, my last final farewell is to thank you for everybody tonight. This event would not be possible with so many people behind the scenes, both from NOAA Ocean Exploration, Woods Hole, the Inner Space Center, who make all of the digital production on this possible, the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute, and our guest experts from Nautilus Live, and the Coonamessett Farm Foundation as well. Again, I'm sure I'm missing people in there. It took a village to pull this together, and hope it supports you young roboticists. Thank you all for tuning in, and good night.